Ruler School is brought to you by Happy Little Hug Factory and these amazing patrons. Extra special thank you to guest lecturer patrons Brody Harris and Lance Albertson. Thank you for your support. Enjoy the video. Hey there everybody, DMO73 here, finally back with a new feature match with commentary for you, showing off some of the new fun decks, very competitive edge for the new Valhalla Rulers. So I am playing a white-black Brunhild list that was designed by Frank Klosser, and Tyler Tompkins is playing the pretty standard Chamimi Zoo list that we saw piloted by lots of different people at the Minneapolis GP. So both very mid-rangey, aggressive decks. Obviously, Tyler has a little bit of an advantage in the fact that he's green, but Brunhild does have a little bit of an advantage here in the form of her board wipe that Chamimi doesn't really have a way to access to cancel necessarily. At the same time, the beauty of Chamimi's Master in it, or Brunhild's Master in it, pretty accurately counters Chamimi's Master Rune. So we'll have to see how this goes. The Brunhild list making heavy use of more darkness than white, and making use of things like Joan d'Arc the Mad Maiden, which can be reanimated with one of Brunhild's runes, so you can kind of stick them on board early and kind of bring them back and kind of have this powerhouse of genes as the game goes on. First turn, Magic Stone of Faith for me, and unfortunately no turn play there, which is fine. The rune deck is kind of established to be able to make up for the fact that we're playing dual colors. First turn, Spirit Stone for Tyler, and then just a pass. We'll see the Whispers of the Angel come out of the rune deck on my side. It's a 1 white when it's in the rune deck, and it lets me gain 100 life and draw a card. So it's one of the things that the deck kind of always has a turn 1 white play, even if it doesn't have anything in hand, which is a really good thing to do with the list. Stone of the Dark Castle. I catch here in a little bit that I need a mystery counter, but there's my first darkness source. Realizing that there's no real swiftness stuff that I have to worry about, I think I play the smarter play in the long run, and I play the Ray the Black Owl. Being able to flip that 0 over is super important. Chamimi pretty much just has targeted spot removal, so a flipped over 0 is actually pretty important. It does have access to the 600 damage in the form of doing Sandstorm plus Chamimi, but it's not terrible. Sorry, Snipe Away Me plus or Rapid Fire Me plus the Sandstorm for 600 damage, which is not super great, but at the same time he can only do it once, and a lot of the stuff can kind of survive. So we see that Lorite flashed in at end of turn, going into a Lorite 7 Disciples. He can't attack into Ray, so he has to attack with me, so he'll gain 9 and I'll lose 9. So Lorite 7 Disciples is a massively huge card in this format. Lorite is kind of king, and so this kind of 3-drop, you can drop it really early, gets all these different effects, and the longer it sits on board, the just more and more damaging it can be. So I get to flip over that 0, which feels really nice because it has flying, so I'll be able to answer that Lorite 7 Disciples right now without the Lorite getting in the way. Choosing to pay 1 for Look of Corruption. This lets me look at his hand and pick a card 4 cost or less and remove it from his, make him discard it. So I get a little bit of knowledge here, seeing a Fair spell, a Lorite, a couple of Violas, choosing to take the Lorite. He doesn't necessarily have an easy way to be able to bring that back to his hand. I don't really have a lot of quick cast spells. The Fair spell isn't super impactful right now. I don't really care about the Fairy, and the Viola also right now is not super relevant because of the fact that he's tapped out. So playing the Bethor, so I have that flying blocker, and then I'm going to go ahead and use 0 to kill the 7 Disciples, get that out of the way. Hitting a 3rd Spirit Stone. Looking at his rune deck, seeing if there's anything in there he wants to make use of. Plays out the Fairy. This is the Fairy from the green structure deck that you can banish by paying 1 green to draw a card. So it's a little way for help him cycle his deck a little bit. Doesn't do anything else other than that, just passes the turn to me. Call for Stone hit another Magic Stone of Faith, unfortunately getting a little bit flooded in the white department. Definitely would prefer to see more darkness sources. The deck does run 6 darkness sources and only 4 light. Gonna go ahead and pay 3 here to play Blazer, Vice Leader of the Chivalrous Thieves, 7/8, who will let me draw an extra card every turn, so I can start to kind of have a better sculpted hand to make use of my weird stone bases. Swinging in with the Bethor for 9 or for 5. He says that's fine, I'll take it. Goes down to 4, or thinks about it. Decides instead to flash in the Viola and pumps up his fairy so that I have to block it. Get to draw a card there because it dies. Kind of an interesting decision, I think, to use the Viola. I think it was probably a good call here because he, on my turn, gets to then take one of my creatures, stick another creature on board, and doesn't really lose anything, so he just gets to go plus here, which I think is a smart move. And now he's threatening more creatures than I have answers to. So I have to try to get through my blocker. He has to try to consider going through my blockers, but at the same time having more creatures than me means that he can kind of play more tricks, especially with me being only at 1 white will, and him being completely recovered to be able to make do whatever he needs to for the turn. Still debating on whether or not when he wants to make use of those runes. Certainly has Rapid Fire me and Sandstorm in the rune deck. Probably the Master Rune as well, and probably Spirit Meditation is a pretty solid call. The question becomes, what is the 5th rune? It's most likely a Yokai Festival. This is a very common card that is played for the Chamimi list, just to be able to force damage through by going to go get 2 of the 100 Eyes Oni. Swinging in with the Viola, swinging in with the Flying Fairy. I say that's fine, I will take all of that damage. I'm not going to try to stop it with just these 2 guys on board. Playing a second Fairy here. Let's see, he has that Winds of Vitality in his hand. Fair Spell and another Rachel. Sorry, Viola, my bad. I actually missed the Blazer call here, which is a misplay on my part for sure. I'd get a game error warning. Having that extra card would severely impact the outcome of this turn, potentially. Oh, and then I catch it there. So paying 3 still to play Air, Valkyrie of Mercy, which lets me grab a 2-drop Resonator or less from my graveyard and put it into the field, so I get that Bethor back. So now I have those 2 flyers. Swing in with Blazer at the Viola. Flashes in a Viola to then pump that one up, which will make it an 8/8, which will kill my Blazer. I think that was a poor move on my part because I knew he had the second Viola in hand. I kind of just forgot about it. I would have been smarter to swing for the Fairy. Swing the Gene. That has a Swiftness into the Viola to try to kill it. Gonna go ahead and block with the Lorite. So one other misplay here is in response to me playing the Air and targeting the 2-drop in my graveyard, you could have easily sacrificed the Viola to then make it so that I wouldn't get the card in my graveyard. That is a potential play. It's not necessarily the right one in this case because I would still have the Air on board and he would be losing his Viola. So he'd kind of be going -1. It would just mean I paid 3 for a vanilla. And then he still has that Winds of Vitality, which I didn't know about, so then it gets pumped up and the Fairy ends up killing 0 anyway. So it's a pretty terrible turn on my side of things, just because of the fact that the cards that he had in his hand, he was able to kind of out-combat trick me there. So really good play by Tyler, kind of making me walk into killing my own stuff. So So this is a moment where doing the 6 damage to the board combination with Chamimi's runes combination is probably the best call. It only costs him 1 will to be able to do this, because Sandstorm is free and it will do 2, and then Snipe Boy Me, or Rapid Fire Me does 4. It will kill the Bethor, and the Jean will have enough damage on her that she will then immediately die. And it also kills air, or it leaves air alive, but because I've lost having 3 J/Resonators, Jean will see that she has enough damage to be killed. She won't have her indestructible anymore, and then she'll just die. So Tyler getting to push in a lot of damage here, pretty much uncontested. I will go ahead and throw the air Valkyrie of Mercy into the Viola, just to turn it into a trade so I don't take nearly as much, and then I'll take the damage from the fairies. Taking me down to 15. So Tyler doing an excellent job of what the Chamimi deck is supposed to do, which is just pressure all this damage very, very quickly. Still a little bit concerned about the Viola. Kind of need to get that off the board before I do anything else, especially with a Brunhild play. Flipping over Brunhild, I'd have to target something, and then he could just respond by banishing it. So I'm going to go ahead and do Odin's Judgment here. It's a little bit suboptimal because he hasn't used the Master Rune of Chamimi yet. But my thought is he only has 2 cards in hand. He's a little bit underflooded, and this way I can kind of start making use of the other cards in my hands to kind of start replenishing my board state to the point where maybe I can stick multiple Genes and then be ready to go to answer those elephants just by having these unkillable Genes now that his 6 damage combination is gone. So attempt to play Faith in the Darkness here, and he uses Ruin Stories to cancel it, which still feels fine for me, mainly because of the fact that now he's used it for a cancel rather than bringing it back cards from his hand. So he only has the 1 card in hand at this point. Tyler calling for dog as well as calling for stone. Drawing into a magic boomerang here pretty much forces the decision for this turn to go ahead and be casting the Elephant Rush. So out comes those 3 elephant tokens. They're all 10/10s, and then next turn he could just Judgment Chamimi, and they'll become 14 14s. So looking at my hand, there's an Oborozuki there, which doesn't really do me much, at least yet. I do have on Hirnyar Summon, still be able to bring back a Jean. The question kind of becomes, you know, how am I gonna answer this turn back to kind of reestablish and protect myself here? So I'm gonna play the 0 here, Ein Hirnyar Summon to target the Jean, which will bring it back to the field, and then perform Judgment of Brunhild, who will then be able to go get me a Resonator, who can grab me the Air Valkyrie of Mercy, who will then trigger and get me the Bethor. I either have to choose between the Bethor or the Ray, and I choose the Bethor because it's a flyer and it also draws me a card, so I can refill my hand a little bit better. Now the nice thing here is having the Oborozuki in hand, if he does decide to kill he does decide to flip Chamimi, and then I can throw Brunhild under the bus to block one of the elephants, then the next turn I can follow it up with the Awakened Oborozuki and just potentially, if I get it to enough will, just kill the Chamimi outright. Hitting that second Speaking Stone, deciding to go for Call Stone here instead of Judgment, I think is an interesting decision. He does have access to the Magic Boomerang here. He does have access to Lorite's 7 Disciples, but with no Lorite, it's not going to get as much value out of it. I think performing Judgment might have been the best call. I stop 1. The other thought is I can stop 1, 2, 3 of the... pretty much at this point I can stop all 3 of those elephants without taking any damage, and then he risks being kind of tapped out and not really dealing any damage, and then facing a pretty threatening crackback with a lot of flyers as well. Especially knowing that the Brunhild deck typically runs Blessing of the Sun, which is everything +2/+2 and then lets them untap. So paying 3 here, to go ahead and use his last rune, choosing not to go the Spirit Meditation route to try to refuel his hand. Instead, he's going to do the Yokai Festival. So he gets to go into his deck and grab 2 Yokai of cost 2 or less because of the cost reduction of Yokai Festival while being in the rune deck. So you can go grab these 2 100-eyes ones and make it so 2 of my things can't block. Obviously, the one that he wants to make not be able to block is Jean. And then chooses to make it so that my Bethor can't block it too, so I don't get to draw a card off of it. I do get to stop 1 still, because Brunhild is bigger at this point, so I'll be able to successfully block 1 with Brunhild and kill it if he does decide to swing in. So debating about how he wants to go about swinging for these turns. The 100-eyes ones aren't going to be able to attack. So this is a misplay on my part for sure. I absolutely 100% opened myself up to being killed here. I block with the skeleton, and then he just magic boomerangs it, and I'm going to take the 1000 damage. The problem is here is that the other card in his hand, one of those other ones, had been a Winds of Vitality. I actually just lose there. There was no reason at all for me to not just block with Brunhild. Because even if he has a Winds of Vitality there, Brunhild dies, which is fine, but she's served her purpose, and I don't take that 1000 damage, and then Oborozuki becomes more of a threat, because I don't have to worry about killing my own J-Ruler with it. Tyler here hoping to probably draw into a Lorite, just so that he has access to make use of it next turn, by stacking the Spirit Stones. It's a little risky, because he hasn't like for surely won yet, and now he's kind of going to fewer will sources than I do. But it's not necessarily a terrible decision. Unfortunately, the cards he drew were a fairy and a hippo. Hippo is then a dead draw because he has no other beast in his hand. But he can at least play the fairy, which is another flyer, so he can threaten more damage that way. Going to my turn, recover, I get to get the Ray Flip. So a Blessing of the Sun here for 1 will would actually be really solid, because I could just go ahead and do a ton of aggression and then just recover it all. But I'm going to go ahead and swing for 5 with the Bethor. Pay 2. Cast a Jean, so I have 2 Jeans now. I only get access to 1 more of my runes at this point, so I have to figure out which one I want to try to make use of. Blessing of the Sun would probably be the most accurate, especially considering how that Jean now has swiftness. So I could push in a lot of damage with Brunhild and Zero and both Jeans, and then just recover everything to be good for blocking. But instead, I decide to go ahead. It's a matter of like, do I establish more board presence just to be able to block everything? Even being at 5 life, it's a little risky, but the fact that I now have 0 up makes me a little bit more confident. And the fact that he's already used up Yokai Festival, so he's cut off from runes. So I'm going to go ahead and say, let's look at your hand here with a look of corruption. I see that Lorite's to 7 Disciples, and immediately that gets pulled. So now his hand is just a Fair Spell, which is essentially dead against my board. And then a Hippo that he won't be able to use. So using that Brunhild's Wrath to be able to kill a Rested Resonator, to kill one of the tokens. Identifying that the 2 Genes are able to block the 2 elephant tokens, so I don't really care about that anymore. I've got lots of blockers on the ground, 2 flyers, the skeleton token, and the air Valkyrie of Mercy to be able to block the other cards that he has. Even with a flipped Chamimi, I feel pretty confident at this point. And flipping Chamimi would cost him all of his will, which means the card that he draws into his hand doesn't really do much. The card that you see there is unfortunately a fairy, so not really going to do him much here. Does decide to call the stone, hits a spirit stone, so potentially that goes into being another stone, or another card, which it might give him what he needs. But at this point in time, the most he could hope for would be a Lorite 7 Disciples, which would just have swiftness. And again, at this point, I have 4 blockers for potential 4 creatures. Plays the other fairy. I can't really allow him to have any successful swings here, or even put myself at risk for taking any damage. First off, any of these creatures connect and it's lethal. So I'm just gonna throw Brunhild under it, just in case. And he says he'll pay 1 in response to me blocking with Brunhild to try to draw a card. Draws into a magic boomerang, which doesn't really help him much, unfortunately, because of 0 being on the board. So sacrifices the other spirit stone to say maybe I can draw into something. Not the best play, I don't think, purely because it did draw into a second hippo, so he at least can play the first hippo, but it's not really going to help him in getting through this turn, at which point in time I'm going to have another full Sword of Will to be able to start just establishing even more blockers every turn. I'll block with the Air of Mercy, and he'll magic boomerang so it gets negated. Or I'll start to, and then I go, wait a minute, it's just gonna get negated, man. And he goes, oh, yeah, right. So I'm not gonna cast it. So the air does get to kill the Oni. Pretty much at this point, it's a matter of, do you even bother swinging with the elephant tokens because of the genes? To which the answer is no. But there's not really much else that Tyler can do with this hand. There's no point in him not at least playing one of the hippos, because he only has 2 will. He only needs 2 will to be able to cast both of the quick cast cards in his hand. So he might as well just stick the other body on board while he has the chance. Does decide to pop the fairy that he just played that turn, gets a 3rd hippo, so at this point in time he could replay it. I'm not sure if that was the right call. With only having access to 3 will, getting rid of a body on your own side of the board just to draw a card when you didn't have to is seeming a little desperate. It does speak to the fact that, like, this I've been able to kind of reestablish despite being so low on life. And Chamimi really only has like 1 time that they can board wipe, similarly to Brunhild, of course. But after that, the Chamimi deck doesn't really have a lot in the terms of removal. So now one play that he could make here, the problem is, at this point in time, he does have some ways to get around what I have on board state. The problem here is the 0, making it so that I has to kind of like negate, that he has to kind of double hit anything, and he's running really low on will to be able to make that happen. Decides to play the hippo, revealing a hippo. Decides to play that hippo and reveal the 3rd hippo. And at that point in time passes the turn. I am also cut off from my rune deck at this point, purely because of how much divinity I've used. Both of these decks designed to primarily use 4 of their divinity cards. Swing with the Bethor for free damage here. And then I play the Oborozuki, sacrificing the Bethor to give it the fresh blood counter, and then I get to draw a card off of the Bethor. So now this is a flying 8/8, which is really helpful. So I get to draw a card, so I kind of paid 2 to get a bigger body and draw a card. Paying 3 to play that Blazer, just so I can continue to draw even more cards every single turn. Swinging in 12 with Brunhild. Says that's fine, I'll take it. Takes him down to 27. Going into his turn, paying 2 here for a Mickey. So the Mickey here is interesting because with the Magic Boomerang in hand, this gives him a second effect to be able to potentially ping one thing out of the way. You see he has the Elemental Blast that he gets off of the Mickey. So what he could do here is sacrifice the Mickey to remove Zero's ping. Use the Magic Boomerang on Zero and then use the Elemental Blast on Zero and kill it. The problem is then he's to use all his removal and he still has to deal with the fact that I have 2 Genes that can't be killed. And an Oborozuki that has 800 defense. Swings in with 6. I'll never block with the skeleton because its defense is too low. He attempts to pop the barrier on it with Mickey. Then casts Magic. Starts to go cast Magic Boomerang. I say Magic Boomerang's fine. And then he starts to cast Elemental Blast. And here's the thing. Elemental Blast does not have quick cast. So that's really relevant. So it will turn into a trade with the Hippo. Essentially, that's a misplay that kind of costs him the game here. The thing is, though, even if he had played Elemental Blast first, it just means that popping the barrier on it doesn't really actually do anything. Anything that if he had popped the barrier before moving to combat, so in order to make use of the Elemental Blast, I just never throw the thing that he's popped under the bus for the block. Because I have so many creatures available to me, it's pretty safe. Gonna go ahead and play the. He's like, I'll play the Elemental Blast, I guess. Decides to just play the Hippo, and then it will just immediately die. This is the telltale sign that Tyler's pretty much done with the game. He's like, well, I'll just go ahead and start throwing stuff under the bus. Well, I'm gonna miscalculation the Elephant token. He fair spells it, and then I'm gonna go ahead and throw the Gene underneath it. So it has those negative counters. Swings with the other Elephant token. I'll block with the Gene. Swings with the Hippo. Block with the Blazer, which will kill it. Swings with the 100 Eyes one, and I'll block with the Oborozuki, which will kill it. At this point in time, Tyler knows he's lost, but we're still gonna kind of play it out. Mainly because I have 2 Genes, and I'm trying to see if I can get 3 Genes on board at the same time. But this is essentially lethal, so we'll be going to game 3 here in just a little bit. So you guys can kind of place your bets on whether you think I can get to 3 Genes in this game. Playing a Bethor. Swinging with Oborozuki at him for 8, sacrificing the Bethor to kill one of the Elephant tokens for the -4/-4, getting to draw a card. Playing another Bethor, playing an Oborozuki, sacrificing the Bethor to draw a card, hoping to see maybe I could draw into the 3rd Gene, but no, it's just the Resuscitating Will. As we transition to the next game here, please go ahead and check out the Patreon down below. It helps to go to support the channel with lots of cool perks. You can also buy Force of Will swag at the Ruler School spreadshirt down below, and be sure to hit that subscribe button and the bell to be notified when all of our videos goes live. Thank you guys so much, and let's go on to the next game. So going into game 2 here, decides to put me on the draw. First turn Spirit Stone into a first turn Fairy. You see he already has Lowrite +7 Disciples, which is a really strong start for him. I'll go ahead and go into a turn 1 Energized Ray. It put a lot of pressure on him last game, so we'll try to do it this game too. Pays 1 to play Lowrite. And then plays an Elemental Blast Torrented to deal 700 damage to the Ray and swing at me for 4. Pretty strong move there. It definitely tells me that he has a 7 Disciples, but my deck doesn't really have a lot of instant speed removal in it, at least in the main board. And one thing to keep in mind is all of these games, none of these games are sideboarded. So in knowing that he probably has the Disciples, I'm like, well, I'm going to cast this Look of Corruption, except that I'm going to take some damage, and then steal that 7 Disciples so I don't take even more next turn when you'd be able to cast it unimpeded. Probably going up to 3 will here. Plays the Mickey. Gets to draw 2 cards. Grabs the Winds of Vitality. It's gonna pump the Lowrite up for 1 damage and swing in for 6. I'll go down to 30. At the end of the turn, I'll go ahead and cast Whispers of the Angel, get to draw a card and gain 8 life. Go back up to 38. Recognizing that I need to grab my mystery counter. Paying for another Look of Corruption. Winds of Vitality, and 100 Eyes 1, and Ruin Story. I'm gonna grab the Ruin Story because it's a way for him to, 1, cancel my stuff, and 2, bring back his 7 Disciples, which is the main threat of the evening. Calling for that Speaker Stone. He does have the Viola, which is a pretty strong card for him with my reanimation, but at this point in time, he's holding all the tempo, so it's not necessarily a card that he's going to use for that fact at this moment. Swings in for 4. I say that's fine. Swings for 4. I say that's fine. Pumps up the Lowrite to swing in for 2. And this is an absolute misplay that comes from playing casual games. I use the miscalculation here on the Lowrite just to say, like, how dare you disrespect me with the Lowrite for 2 damage. That's absolutely 100% the wrong play. That miscalculation should have been used on one of the bigger creatures, or just straight should have been saved for when he started to bring out the elephant tokens. There was no reason for me to avoid taking that 2 damage. Seeing a Faith in the Darkness, which is very nice, but without a Gene already on board and not seeing double darkness sources is really, really bad. So I guess I'll go ahead and say, well, let's continue to sculpt your hand as best we can, and we'll grab this Blazer. Time to trigger the effect. Trying to decide if he wants to flash in the Viola now or try to let for it to get discarded. He does decide to cast in the Viola, which I think is the right choice. Getting to take that Winds of Vitality out of the way. Swings in with the Viola. I say I'll go ahead and block with the Blazer. Says that's okay. I'll go ahead and take that damage. I'll go ahead and take the sacrifice there. Kind of an interesting decision here to use this the rapid fire shot just to get rid of the Blazer. It does make my Genes a lot more powerful, and the bigger my board state becomes, a lot more powerful, provided I start getting access to some darkness sources, because he really does need the access to Sandstorm plus rapid fire. So this is kind of an interesting decision on his part. He decides to just burn the rest of his hand here just to put everything on the board, getting me for another 8 damage there, or 6 damage there. Based on what this Stone Call is, it's very possible that I could just choose to do the Odin's Judgment. The thought being, if I don't right now, without a lot of quick cast stuff, next turn he can just go ahead and flip Chamimi, and all of those are going to be huge anyway, enough to be lethal. So this turn, it forces him to, if he wants to be able to kind of recover or reestablish, he has to tap out, or +1 will, to be able to play the elephants, which gives me a little bit of more of a time to recover. At least this way, I can board wipe and kind of play a card to kind of gain the tempo back a little bit, and then reestablish next turn. I get the Ray, which is a really, really nice card to get off of Faith in the Darkness here. Would have loved a Gene so that I could do like a follow-up next turn, a potential double Gene to have the 3 Genes. But seeing the 1 is still very, very good. Or seeing the 1 Ray, which will flip it to 0, makes for reestablishing my board and keeping it protected much better, especially considering the fact that he's just used the major half of his board wipe. Calls the Stone. Now, one option that he could do here instead is to, rather than play the, I mean, you could do both, is he could do the Spirit Magic trick, which is to pay 2 green with 2 Spirit Stones, stack them both, draw 2 cards, then activate Spirit Meditation to bring those stones back into play and grab a card from graveyard or draw a card. And then he'd still have 5, and then he could play the elephants as well. So he would get to draw 3 cards and then play elephants. Instead, he just decides to play a hippo and then put out the 3 elephant tokens. Get to flip over the Ray, which is excellent. The problem is, at this point in time, a Chamimi flip is definitely not out of the question, and I really don't have a ton of good stuff to targets to animate. Reanimate with Brunhild. I do get to peek at the 1 card in his hand if I choose to bring the Blazer back in. The transition here is because I had to walk away from the game for a little bit, so that's why. Did choose to go ahead and call for Stone, playing the Air Valkyrie of Mercy here, getting to grab the Ray. Playing a Skeleton Horde. And I do have a Gene here, so I can stick the Gene, so I can at least answer 1 of the elephants. And then having to pass the turn. Another transition for having to walk away. Being a dad does have its obligations, so thank you guys so much for being willing to transition there. Getting another Speaking Stone here, and choosing not to do Judgment I think is an interesting choice. It would put a lot of pressure on board, pretty much steal a ton of my stuff. Maybe the thought is it wouldn't do too much, because then I just have a free turn to reestablish, and he would have paid 5 life or 5 will to do nothing. Instead, going for the Yokai Festival. So getting to stop me from being able to, he can spend both of the targets on Gene, so that Gene can't block this turn, which I think is pretty smart. Because 0 will negate 1, and then the other one can be stopped. Swings with the elephant. I'll try to block with the skeleton. He says that's fine. Get my skeleton token. Swings with the elephant. I'll throw the ray under the bus. The proper play here would be to use Sandstorm to block. The proper play here, I believe, would have been to use Sandstorm to just clear the skeleton token off outright, just to prevent me from being able to use it. Ultimately, it doesn't really matter because he ended up taking the creature anyway. He's Sandstorming after the fact. It just potentially leaves him more chances to possibly get damage in. Ruin Stories to force me to sacrifice a creature, having to choose between green and 0. I'm going to keep the 0. The effect to be able to keep my stuff protected is very solid, and then plays the McKay to kind of refill his hand here. He is locked out of Spirit Meditation at this point, which feels pretty good for me. And having the Gene engraved for the Einherjar summon is also very nice. Throwing into another Blazer here. Not really doing much with access to only 6 will currently. Really needing to try to get some more of my 2-drops or things like Faith in the Darkness into a Gene would be particularly effective. Paying 4 to do the Judgment of Brunhild here. I'm probably going to go grab the Air of Mercy, which will bring me back a Ray, just to kind of get as much value off of it as possible. Oh, just using to get the Blazer to kind of look at what that extra card is. The other thing is it also kind of helps me answer a Elephant by being able to remove it from play, and then Einherjar Summon to bring back the Gene. Paying another 2 for the Brunhilds to kill one of the elephants to get those off the board. Choosing to swing the Gene into one of the elephants. He's going to go ahead and block with the Mikkei. And passing the turn there. Now comes the Chamimi flip, so now we're sitting at 3 10-10s and 2 14-14s, which is a lot of pressure on board. With only 3 blockers, I'm most certainly going to take some damage. The problem is I have to block both of the elephants, otherwise it's pretty much over. Swing with 1, I'll remove it from combat with the Blazer. Swings with the other one, I'll throw the 0 under it. Now the Brunhild can answer one of the 2, or one of the 10,000 blockers, or 1,000 attackers here. Swings there, I'll go ahead and block with the Brunhild to kill it. But this does give them the avenue to kill my Blazer with one of them, and then he can swing the other one into Gene and kill it, because I will only have the 2 creatures. He could also choose to kill my Brunhild if he wanted as well. Sacrificing the Spirit Stones to try to refill his hands, see if he can make use of these other 2 will in a better way. Swings it into the Brunhild to go ahead and kill it. Uses the 1 magic boomerang to deal some damage to Gene, and the second one to just go ahead and kill it outright. So very successfully clearing my board without having to really worry about leaving any pressure or resisting any pressure, or removing any pressure from his board state against me. So definitely not looking very good for me. Hitting another darkness source here doesn't really do much for me. My hand is flooded with high cost creatures in terms of the blazers. And slowly my life total will get whittled down. So paying 4. One of the blazers. Try to look at the card in his hand. Steal the Ferris spell. Paying 2 for a Bethor. Staring down 2 14/14s and 2 10/10s. Bethor gonna go ahead and remove from combat with the blazer. Tries to swing in with the second one. I'll block it. Draw a card. Swings in for 10, and I take that. Swings in for another 10, takes me down to 6. Paying 4 for another blazer. They're pretty much at this point in time just trying to stall me out. Not really having a ton of trying ways to like climb back. The only hope is to maybe try to draw into enough 2-drops in a Gene to be able to reestablish, or an Orb-Rozuki that I can pay enough to be able to kill the Chamimi and kind of then have my blockers ready to defend the day. Playing a Skeleton Horde. Playing the Bethor again. Passing the turn there. You see him see the Viola there. Makes me think that potentially he has the Ruin Story, which the idea is if he forces a block with my flyer, if I could let Bethor die, then what he could do is he can use Ruin Story to grab the Viola, cast it, and make any of his things flying, and then just kill me. Swing the Blazer, remove it from combat. Swing with the other Blazer, just throw it under the bus. Swings with Chamimi, blocks with the Bethor to draw a card, gets the Geode to Arc. At that point in time, you see the Ruin Story, which he can go get the Viola and make the Hippo flying, and fly over my Skeleton Horde to win the game. So very strong play on that game from Tyler. And with that, we will be moving on to the third game of the match. So I'm putting him back on the draw, hoping this time that I can kind of establish a better board state. And I think in games 1 and 2, clearly learning that as much as it might be advantageous in the moment to do Odin's Judgment before to kind of establish the pressure, the elephant tokens really do a lot of work, and I pretty much have to wait to cast Odin's Judgment until after the elephants have come out onto the board. Seeing the hand here, I start to take the 7 Disciples, and then I go, wait a minute, hold on, let's go back. Knowing that it's going to be a turn before you can even get it, you don't have a Lorite access to it yet, we're going to go ahead and take the Fairy to potentially take away your turn 1 play with the Hippo, because you're not going to want to cast Hippo if you don't have one. And he had no other beast in hand. Unfortunately, he top decks a second Hippo, so that didn't really pay off for me. The only other reason why I did that is because I have access to a Glint of Insight, so I can just call Lorite's 7 Disciples, which will then kill it. Get it out of the way. Another Hippo, a Ruin Story, and then the Viola. So I'm going to sacrifice the fact that I'm taking this 6 damage early, potentially, but it does kind of keep me safe from having to deal with the Lorite's 7 Disciples. unless he has to use the Ruin Story, but that sets him back pretty far. Plays another Hippo here, revealing the first Hippo. So drawing 3 Hippos very, very quickly. Swinging in for 6, I'll go ahead and cast Miscalculation and kill it. Every turn that I can keep myself at higher life is better for me anyway. A better option could have potentially been to wait and just take the 6 and then draw Whispers of the Angel, but that could have been canceled and I wouldn't have gained the life. So instead I'm just gonna take the Miscalculation, potentially remove the creature. Following up with a Bethor plus Skeleton on my turn, setting up a little blocker defense wall. Hitting another Spirit Stone for Tyler. Swinging for 6, throw the Skeleton under the bus, get my 1/1 Skeleton token. He does have Lorite plus Ruin Stories here, so you could potentially be seeing a Lorite 7 Disciples play in the coming turns. At that point in time, deciding to pass the turn. Seeing the Ray is pretty nice, especially considering how I'm about to be able to play a Gene, potentially, with a Faith in the Darkness. Hoping to see a Faith in the Darkness turn into a Gene here. Unfortunately not seeing it, so I'll go ahead and grab the Ray, because it is the only other card that I can grab here. I could grab the Frankenstein, might have been the better call, but I decide not to, and then I just go ahead and pass the turn there, knowing that I'm probably going to need to make use of my Rune deck here in a second. End of the turn, we see that Ruin Stories. It's going to bring back the Lorite 7 Disciples back to his hand. We're also going to see the Hardcast Lorite come into play here at the end of my turn. So going into his turn, see he drew into a second Lorite 7 Disciples there, which is pretty strong for him. Can't cast both in one turn, which would have probably been pretty justifiable to then do an Odin's Judgment, but he does get the first one, which will give it all of the abilities. I do have the Bethor, which can block it, which is pretty nice. But I said, you know, I'm going to go ahead and take the damage, take the 9 up 9. I'm going to go ahead and gain 8 life afterwards anyway, with Whispers of the Angels, so I'm not super just sad about it. I'm going to go ahead and block the Hippo with Bethor instead. He's going to go ahead and burn his Energize to play the Viola to pump up the Hippo so that he wouldn't lose his Hippo in response. Or so that he can, yeah. Because it is a 6/5. Whispers of the Angel at the end of the turn. Drawing that extra card. Drawing for my main phase. Seeing another, I think another Faith in the Darkness. Hoping this time to potentially get a Gene. 0 coming into play here, so I can once again deal with the Lorite 7 Disciples. Getting a second mystery counter. Looks like I have a Gene plus a Faith in the Darkness. Paying 3 for a Blazer. Start drawing those extra cards every single turn. Then paying 2 for the Gene to just hard cast it. Get the guaranteed Gene. Attempt to swing the Gene into the Lorite 7 Disciples. He says that's fine, I'll block with the Lorite. I go, okay, well then I'll just swing 0 into the 7 Disciples and kill it that way. He's tapped out. The 0 is bigger than the 7 Disciples. I can get it off the board. This way he also doesn't have the Lorite to be able to make the other 7 Disciples in his hand that much stronger. is back to having access to that combination of Sandstorm plus Snipe Away, or Rapid Fire, but I do have 0 plus Blazer, which are both stronger than that 6 damage would be able to be. Plus I have the protection that comes with having 0 out on board. So feeling pretty safe with my life total being what it is. Still having access to Odin's Judgment and all my other runes. And having not taken this much damage at this point. Very much damage. Tyler having to decide with a handful of kind of weak stuff and tricks to get around 0, but nothing much to like make use of getting around 0, whether or not he just wants to try to kind of clear the board or potentially draw into something a little bit better. Paying 2 to play the Mickey, getting to look at the top 3 cards of his deck. So I guess he didn't draw into a 7 Disciples, my apologies. Seeing Viola, Viola, and Lorite. Doing the Sandstorm and the Rapid Fire, get that damage in. At this point in time, if I block with anything, it means that I'm going to lose both that thing and Jean. It's going to pop the Mickey on the 0, and then do the Magic Boomerang on her as well. I feel like that was a little bit of the incorrect play. Cost him 4 cards to get rid of 2 of mine, including one of them that he had put onto field this turn. He does get a free swing because I'm not going to block with the Blazer because I want to keep it on board and get the extra draw. So I'm going to take the 12 damage here, going down to 29. But ultimately, I'm not sure that was the right decision, especially since now he's completely open to Blazer killing one of his creatures. Getting an extra draw off the Blazer for the main phase. Getting another stone from the castle. With Jean being dead, I can use an Heronyarn summon. It's a really risky play here. The right decision would have been to, and I actually catch it and I go, wait a minute, let's go back a second. To kill the Viola first. The right play from Tyler would then be to banish it in response to target the Jean. But it does let me get it, so I get the Iron Heronyarn summon for the Jean. And I cast Faith in the Darkness here. Get to dig through the top 5, hoping to see another Jean come out. Do see it, so she comes in as a 9/7. Playing another 2 to bring back another Faith in the Darkness, hoping to get a 3rd one. Do get to turn it into a 0, the Ray, which is nice. I probably should have, not having the Darkness Will, it's nice that I get the Ray there, because I do have the one in my hand, but I just don't have the will to be able to make use of it. Swing the smaller Jean into his Hippo, just to kill it, and then swing the Jean that has 900 attack at him to take him back down to 4,000. Just gonna go ahead and cast the Elephant Rush, get those 3 out onto the board. And follow it up by playing the Fairy, so he at least gets those 4 creatures onto the board here. I missed the second draw here from the Blazer, I believe. Oh, and I do catch it. See a Blazer Resonator, which would be great to cast right now. Nothing really much to target engrave for a Brunhild summon, so I'm just going to go ahead and call Stone. This is the Magic Stone of Corruption. It's the one that forces your opponent to discard cards. Paying 4 for the Blazer, saying I would like to look at your hand, please. Seeing the Viola, we immediately get rid of it. We don't want to deal with anything suddenly having flying. that we don't want to. Playing the Skeleton Horde. Going ahead and saying, you know what, let's go ahead and make use of this will, give Glint of Insight flashback, and just steal the Hippo too, just in case your top deck is another Hippo. Swinging for 8 in the air with 0, taking him down to 32. And at that point in time, there's no reason to swing with anything else. I don't have a flyer to be able to answer the fairy, but I'm still at 27 life. So even with a flip, it would take me down to being 19 life. And I have the jeans and the blazer to be able to answer all three of the tokens. But the other thing is too is I can just throw the skeleton underneath the token, because there's no way possible that he would have 2 cards to be able to force the block out of the way. So it's just safe to take the 8 there, go down to 19. Lets me draw for my turn. See a 3rd gene there. Call for stone. I believe the proper play here, I do miss the 2nd card draw off of the blazer, the 3-drop blazer. I believe the right call here would be to do Blessing of the Sun, to make it so that I can untap everything, you know, just get all this extra damage. The problem being that Chamimi gives +4/+4 to everything, so even +2/+2 is not going to do anything. So I'm going to go ahead and swing for that 8 damage with 0 here, taking him down to 24. Kind of shortcut it there a little bit. I say, well, I'll swing with 9. See what happens. Says I'll block with the token. Swing for 7. Blocks with the token. Swings for 5 with the gene, or 7 with the gene. He says that's fine. I'll go down to 17. Swings for, and I think about swinging for 9 with the gene here. But first I go start to produce, and I go, wait a minute, let's be even smarter about it. Let's play the 3rd gene first just to be safe, so that all 3 genes protect themselves, and then we'll go ahead and do the Odin's Judgment to get rid of all the resonators on the board. So all 3 genes will stick around. My token will die. It's gonna banish 1 to get the fairy to draw him a card. And then my skeleton token generates a token. I have 2 genes that are both protected by the 3rd gene, and then I can just stick a couple more bodies on board, hitting the ray and another skeleton. So at this point in time, looking at the fact that he only has 1 card in hand, or 2 cards in hand, the card combination he needs to be able to come back from this situation is Lorite, 7 Disciples, Lorite plus 7 Disciples, plus a Winds of Vitality. So what he's going to do here is he's going to do the trick that Chamimi kind of likes to do, which is Spirit Meditation. So you float 2 green will with Spirit Magic Stones, you sack them, draw 2 cards, you use that 2 floating wheel to cast Spirit Meditation, which brings those 2 Spirit Magic Stones back to your hand, and then you get to draw a card. Or you can bring a Resonator back from the graveyard. He has a Lorite 7 Disciples in grave, which helps him a lot there, which gives him 1 fewer card to grab. Ultimately, he just needed to see a Lorite. Has the 7 Disciples in hand though, but he does have the Lorite there as well. So it lets him, Spirit Meditation, because of the card draws here, actually lets him sculpt the exact hand that he needs because I don't have a flyer. So what he can do here is he can play the Lorite, hard cast it, play the Lorite 7 Disciples to give it the plus, which makes it a 13/13 because of Chamimi, and then can just play Winds of Vitality to pump it up to 19 damage in the air. And I don't have a flyer. So despite having this really oppressive re-established board state, having the card combinations and card draw here and the Winds of Vitality kind of all tucked into his hand does end up giving him what he needs to win the game. But because we're both cheeky and we like to be silly with each other, he's actually gonna do something silly with these 3 Winds of Vitality. So he's gonna call for stone, pay 1, Winds of Vitality to pump it up, 2 Winds of Vitality to pump it up, and 3 Winds of Vitality to pump it up for 31 damage. So there you guys have it. That is the match. Huge thanks to Tyler for playing the list. Tons of fun. Be on the lookout for the deck profiles later this week. And until next time, this is DMO73 signing off.